Good to have you here to discuss this very timely...
We need to get somebody to close the door behind Mike.
This very timely topic, race and religion in our country. My name is Michael Spath, and I'm the Executive Director of Indiana Center for Middle East Peace. The voice, the Indiana voice for peace, justice, and human rights, especially in the Middle East. So thanks for being here. Before we go any further, our partner from the very beginning of our work, some 15 years ago, has been the Plymouth Congregational Church, United Church of Christ, and Pastor John Gardner and Pastor Ruth Phillips and the leadership and the members of the congregation at Plymouth Church. We really are deeply, deeply connected and respectful, and we love our relationship with Plymouth Church. And John Gardner, if you want to come up and say a word of welcome, we'd love for you to do that. Let's say thank you to John and the people of Plymouth.
Well, good evening, friends. It's good to see a nice turnout this evening for an important and timely conversation. I would bring welcome greetings on behalf of my colleague in ministry here, the Reverend Ruth Phillips, and the members and friends of Plymouth Church, many of whom I see here. And I'm thrilled with the program that the Indiana Center for Middle East Peace has put together for this evening and for the esteemed guests that will be speaking to us this evening. My goodness, I've seen radical Presbyterians here. I've seen radical Episcopalians here at the house tonight. So, and I'm sure there are a lot of others. So, Plymouth Church is a partner with the Indiana Center for Middle East Peace, and I'm personally invested in that work and in that mission. And this is just the kind of program that inspires me. If I may take a moment of privilege, Dr. Spath.
Sure.
I'm mindful there was a pivotal sermon preached by Martin Luther King in April of 1967 at Riverside Church. And it was pivotal because he began to address societal themes that mainstream white America viewed with disfavor. Racism is in our DNA as a country. I mean, it's as old as Plymouth Rock. So we know something about that here, right? But Dr. King diagnosed what he called a malady in the American spirit. That's a sickness in our spirit that could only be cured with what he called a radical revolution of values. And I don't know if we're sick enough yet about what's going on, but I do know that the remedy remains the same. It's a radical revolution of what we value, which is our humanity, our black humanity, our white humanity, and all the wonderful hues and shades that lie between. So if you wonder what you're doing here tonight, I just want you to know that you're doing good work tonight. And whatever happens here, I trust it'll be taken into the streets and make a difference. Welcome.
We're happy that Jim and Marion from Friends of the Third World are here with some of their wares. So before you leave tonight, please take a look at what they have to offer for sale. Jim, thanks for being here as always. On your chairs, you have a flyer with our programs for the winter and spring. And I would just want to point out to you The next couple of programs, we have the Amani Family from Indianapolis, Syrian refugee family who's coming in February, who the Presbyterian Church helped to resettle in Indiana. And you know that Indiana has not been the friendliest of states to refugees. And so it's important that we hear their story. And so we're hosting them in February. We're really excited about hosting the Andalusian Trail, music and dance from North Africa and India and the Middle East in March at Canterbury High School, and there'll be tickets for that. Many of you helped us out with a matching grant from Arts United to help bring them to Fort Wayne, and so we hope that you'll be able to join us in March at Canterbury High School for the Andalusian Trail. And please take a look at some of the rest of the programs that we have coming up in the winter and spring. This year marks the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination. Yet sadly, it's more important than ever to have a conversation about race and religion in our country. Our guests tonight, Irene Paxia and Bill McGill, are two of the most highly respected practitioners of justice and human rights in the whole region. But before I introduce them, I want to offer a framework for our conversation tonight about religion and race in our country today. And as I do so, I recognize that I come here tonight speaking from a place of privilege. I'm white, male, heterosexual, and others. So I don't want to pull any punches tonight, but on the other hand, I also want to speak with a modicum of humility as well. So let me frame our conversation tonight in the next number of minutes. Most people believe that Donald Trump is not a very religious man. And there's plenty of evidence that he's not, in the traditional sense of doctrine, church participation, etc. But if one's religion is their ultimate concern, if religion is what motivates and moves and inspires you, if religion is, as I define it, that which creates meaning, identity, value, and community, then Mr. Trump is one of the most religious occupants of the White House we've ever had. And my thesis is that Donald Trump's religion is whiteness. The White House has never been whiter. Now, I realize that in common parlance, whiteness refers to color. But in reality, there's no such thing as whiteness as skin color. Whiteness is not a DNA genetic descriptor. It's a social construct. Originally, whiteness was created to define the homogenization of Caucasian European immigrants to this country. Immigrants like my ancestors, and many of yours too, from Western Europe who define themselves as white. A melting pot minimizing various distinct cultures, resulting in essence in a dominant white culture in a new land. Even more, whiteness was a racial designation created to legitimize and legalize the subjugation and enslavement of a people. And the church was, in many cases, and still is, complicit. Whiteness defined what you were not. That is, red, yellow, black, brown. And the irony is that although whiteness is a myth, it still is very much a reality. Whiteness has no meaning outside the culture that defines it. As much as whiteness might refer in some cases to color, it is more a social and economic hierarchy invented for the purposes of privilege, power, and supremacy. So when I say that Mr. Trump's religion is whiteness, note his bromance with authoritarian rulers and dictators. It's social Darwinism on steroids. There's the dominant and the dominated. Now I want to be very precise tonight. No matter what color you identify as, whiteness with a capital W is a term of exclusion, of hierarchy, of oppression. It's all about one group exercising power over another. So in the last year and a half, while giving a pass to the alt-right movement in Charlottesville, the president has scapegoated, I'm going to just list them, but it could take me half the night, but I'll do it quickly. The Mexicans, the physically disabled, GLBTQ people, immigrants and refugees, Muslims and Jews, African Americans, Arabs and Palestinians, Native Americans, Haitians, Africans, others from what he called shithole countries, dreamers, women, and even the earth itself. And progressives say he hasn't accomplished much. The morphing of white privilege into white supremacy results in white power. Make America great again, as you can imagine, really means make America white again. An example of Mr. Trump's civil religion, white civil religion, and well, as far as base, was his bullying of Colin Kaepernick and the mostly African-American football players who knelt in protest during the national anthem. Sons of bitches, he called them, who should be fired. No matter what you think of the sport or the use of the anthem at athletic events, his reaction is noteworthy. At the same time he attacked the players, he also criticized the National Football League for being, quote, too soft, too safe. Quote, they want a hit, he said. It's hurting the game. So think about it. He linked football's violence with shaming black protest, patriotism, whiteness, and power. Attempting to reshape our national ethos, our civil religion. How else explain our nation's bipartisan, and it is bipartisan, salivating over all things Israel? Israel, like the United States, is a settler colonial territorial expansionist project. And also like the United States, you know, my button is bigger than yours. It's one of the largest arms dealers in the world, flexing its military muscles internationally, and in addition, testing its military hardware on Palestinians. And Israel's white Ashkenazi Jews discriminating against its non-white Sephardic Jewish citizens, making non-white Jews second-class citizens in their adopted country. That's why the Black Lives Movement has found common cause with the Palestinian Liberation Movement. The militarization of police and the use of incarceration, racial profiling, and targeting youth as a method of control, all prevalent in both urban America and the occupied West Bank. Now, it would be easy to spend our time tonight mocking and vilifying Mr. Trump. I mean, and let's face it, he's easy pickings because he's such a caricature of himself. He's the essence of what James Baldwin means when he says, when you ally power with ignorance, you get the enemy of justice. But focusing on the president gives him too much credit and does a disservice to our understanding of our own history. Donald Trump is not the problem. he's only a symptom of the problem, but he has exposed the problem. There's a much more difficult conversation to be had. Witness. After Mr. Trump's shithole comments, I believe virtually every news outlet, pundit, and preacher ignored this crucial yet uncomfortable point, and John mentioned it in his introduction. We can't even begin to have a conversation until we confront the whiteness built into the very fabric of our country, as well as our own complicity in its racist past. I refuse to call racism America's original sin. I just don't do it. Because that implies it's something natural, something about which we don't have a choice. And we do have a choice. We can choose. We've been taught our own history through white eyes, America's white exceptionalism. The ugly truth we must confront is that our origins as a nation are white with a capital W, born in the ethnic cleansing of an indigenous people, and supported by an economy that made others slaves. Martin Luther King again. Our nation was born in genocide when it embraced the doctrine that the original American, the Indian, was an inferior race. Even before there were a large number of Negroes on our shores, the scar of racial hatred had already disfigured colonial society. He goes on to say, we are perhaps the only nation which tried, as a matter of national policy, to wipe out its indigenous population. End of quote. So today, people of color suffer overwhelmingly from the new Jim Crow, a prison industrial complex, unfair voting rights, gerrymandering, and dog whistle terms like illegal aliens, family values, and states' rights. Because whiteness, with that capital W, is privileged, that means it must be defended. With "in gun we trust" as the creed of our civil religion, a white church theology developed to justify economic exploitation and an industrial revolution based on the slave economy and the exploitation of labor. The churches that are a part of Mr. Trump's base believe in a warrior God, a muscular Jesus, the church militant, combined with a rugged individualism, American exceptionalism and expansionism, built on manifest destiny and Christian nationalism. Let me say that again. A warrior God, a muscular Jesus, the church militant, combined with a rugged individualism, American exceptionalism and expansionism, built on manifest destiny and a Christian nationalism. From our founding, whiteness, this way of distinguishing ourselves from people of color, has undergirded a martial ideology, class hierarchy, and the exploitation of women, people of color, LGBTQ people, and nature. All supported and justified by a white market-based muscular religion. No wonder James Baldwin said that he had to leave the church in order to preach the gospel. Often, this argument is criticized as, quote, playing the race card. But white people with a little w have a difficult time seeing whiteness. It's not me who defined whiteness as power. Our Pilgrim Puritan forebears and other ancestors did. So when critics raise the issue of race, it's about challenging unjust structures that keep people poor and victimized. It's about class and jobs, a secure home and a safe neighborhood, about a living wage and affordable health care. It's about a quality public education not undercut by tax dollars going to vouchers and charter schools. Well, now more uncomfortably and closer to home, Martin Luther King, in his letter from a Birmingham jail, said, you know, it wasn't the White Citizens Council or the KKK who were the stumbling blocks to racial progress, but the white moderate. So let me say a word about us. No doubt Mr. Trump's predecessor was by every standard preferable to him. His character, family life, his respect for the office, and more. But having said that, I believe it's true that social and religious progressives, like me, were so enthralled with having elected a left-of-center person of color as president that we gave him a virtual pass, even in those times when he violated the values we hold most dear. Where were we when Barack Obama deported more than 2.5 million immigrants? Where were we when he increased drone strikes tenfold more than George W. Bush? Where were we when he renewed the Patriot Act and expanded the NSA's mass surveillance program? And where were we when he turned his back on Palestinians to, quote, preserve Israel's qualitative military edge, giving them more money and arms than any of his predecessors, the largest military aid package in the history of the world? And this even after the IDF's slaughter of more than 2,000 Gazans, 550 of which were children.
For a while.
Where were we liberals then? And where were the liberal churches and their pastors then? Just because most of us voted for Obama and would vote for him again in a heartbeat, I'm assuming most of us, maybe not all, but most of us. And even though there's absolutely no comparison to the present occupant of the White House, and even though he encountered unprecedented obstruction from the opposition party, the moment he was elected, the very moment he was elected, we should have been stronger. Our churches and people of faith and people of conscience should have been stronger in holding him to our faiths and our nation's highest ideals. The reasons many of us supported him and would support him still are those very reasons we should have been more critical of him and held him to a higher standard. I understand as citizens we have to think practically and in binary terms when you're in the voting booth. I get that. And I understand the practical realities of the political process. I get that too. But the prophetic hears only one voice. Our moral duty shouldn't change when our candidate wins. That's when our voices need to be clearer and more vocal than ever in the public square. So the question each one of us has to wrestle with: how can you support a president or a party or a political representative passionately with all you have, and at the same time hold their feet to the fire, hold them accountable to our nation's and our faith's highest ideals, especially in such a contentious, binary political environment? That's not an easy thing to do. And even though she wouldn't have been a daily embarrassment like Mr. Trump, I wonder how much we'd be holding a President Clinton's feet to the fire had she won. Just asking. We expect it from the religious right, but progressive churches can't simply be the uncritical enablers and religious arm of a particular political party. We lose our credibility when we are selectively prophetic. It's a white liberal indulgence and I'm including myself here again, that we wear our guilt about our privilege as a badge of honor, that it somehow justifies our moral superiority. Hand-wringing and feeling guilty while we carry on about our business is us liberals' way of salving our conscience and paradoxically letting ourselves off the hook while we still show the world we care. We feel superior because we feel guilty, not like the other. Repentance and resistance, that's what's needed. Repentance is not just something you feel, it's something you do. Liberal guilt is no substitute for action. Repentance must lead to activism. Otherwise, it's just so many crocodile tears. In my life, the prophetic of the African American and Palestinian and other liberation voices have been especially powerful for me. They really do humble me. I mean, when they speak, I listen. Black prophetic fire, Cornel West calls it. Prophetic churches are healthy churches. The prophetic role of the church and all people of conscience cannot be selective. It confronts power no matter who wields it, even if it's your guy, your woman, your candidate. It confronts power no matter who wields it, making sure it's just. And not only the church, but our nation's repentance must begin in an honest acknowledgement of America's white exceptionalism. Truth first, then reconciliation. Whiteness is incompatible with democracy, civil and human rights. But Trump's America is our America. So we need a strong prophetic voice that calls us to die to whiteness and join the struggle for liberation if America is to be redeemed. Again, Martin Luther King, the Christian preacher, said, "Every flag is beneath the cross," which I interpret as every political ideology and party, every economic system, and even every religion must be judged by the criterion of the dignity of a single human life and respect for the planet. Repentance and resistance. From what quarter of our nation will we receive moral leadership? Will it come from the various faiths, religious leaders? Or will they abdicate their proper role and, no matter the political party, be court preachers for empire? Resistance, strategic, determined, steely, courageous. A new vision of freedom with artists and poets and musicians and playwrights helping us to create new metaphors and symbols, fresh and relevant rituals, a reborn civil religion, an ethos worthy of our religious principles and democratic ideals. At such a time as this, resistance is a moral necessity, a moral duty. Repentance and resistance. I'm going to close. John mentioned Martin Luther King's sermon at Riverside Church. It was 1 year to the day before he was assassinated. A few months later, 8 months before he was killed, August 1967, King gave an address, the keynote address to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in Atlanta, entitled, "Where do we go from here?" And if we really want to honor King's legacy, as John mentioned, we need to work for what he called this revolution of values in all areas of society. And what did he mean by that, a revolution of values? Well, this is how he ended the speech. I've decided to stick with love. That's what he said. Love is ultimately the only answer to mankind's problems. A strong, demanding love. For I've seen too much hate. We must address ourselves to the restructuring of the whole American society, to the capitalist economic system, and to the broader distribution of wealth. A nation that will keep people in slavery for 244 years will thingify them, and exploit them, and poor people generally economically. And a nation that will exploit its poor economically will then have to use its military might to protect its foreign investments. The triple evils of racism, economic exploitation, and war are all interrelated. Racism, economic exploitation, and war. Like Nicodemus, he said, America must be born again. So, to wrap it up, as he put it, when our days become dreary, with low hovering clouds of despair, and when our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a creative force in the universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil, a power able to make a way out of no way and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. Thank you. Bill and Irene, if you want to stay put, or you can come up here and sit. Okay, Irene, I'm going to introduce you both, and then you can come up and take your place. Irene Paxia is the Executive Director of Amani Family Services in Fort Wayne. She's held the position of Community Development Specialist in the Office of Housing and Neighborhood Services for the City of Fort Wayne, as well as directed the MIX, Multicultural Information Exchange Program of the American Red Cross, overseeing international services, community engagement, and the disaster plan for immigrants and refugees. She's also co-founder of the Public Safety Committee of the Multicultural Council and oversaw the 4 editions in 3 languages of the International Guide to Greater Fort Wayne. She's a Leadership Fort Wayne graduate and is certified as a first aid rescuer, as well as in disaster relief and international humanitarian law. Amani Family Services partners with immigrant and refugee families, offering programs in family and community support. Please welcome Irene Paxia.
Thank you. Let me start with saying this. English is not my first language. I started speaking English when I was in my mid-20s. So being in a room like this, here, following Reverend Gardner and Michael Spath, and using English as my 3rd out of 4 languages, I think, it's intimidating. It would be intimidating any day. It's particularly intimidating today. When I looked back at the Facebook event that Michael put up, which happened to also pull the picture of our staff members from Amani Family Services. I don't know if anybody saw that. That was very nice. I thought to myself, what in the world have I agreed to? But before I started what I want to share, let me just tell you just a couple of things to help you understand where I'm coming from. I am Italian. Personally, I was born and raised in Venice, Italy, and I happened to be in Fort Wayne just out of just chance. I happened to fall in love with somebody that I met. He was my server at a restaurant a few years ago, and he happens to be from Fort Wayne, and it was meant to be. We're absolutely in love with each other, and that was almost 15 years ago, and I've been living in Fort Wayne, Indiana since 2005. This has been a great adventure for me. I was planning on living here for a year, and it's been a little longer than that. During this time, so what is it now, almost 13 years of living in Fort Wayne, I have rarely felt nervous about being a foreign-born. I am fairly confident. I am educated. I have 2 master's degrees. I speak English pretty well. I'm white. You know, all of the things that should help me, and they do help me. At the same time, there was one time, and that was when I was stopped by the police in Fort Wayne, and I was afraid of, are they going to ask me for my passport? Are they going to believe me that I have the rights to be here? So that was one time where I thought, oh my goodness, am I in trouble just because I'm a foreign-born, even though I have all rights to be here? And at that time, the officer was just there to help me and making sure that I was okay. And I was like, wow, this is really good. This is America. The police is helpful. I have no problem, no reason to fear being a foreign-born person with a strong accent. And then I have been living in my bubble, right? I've been surrounding myself with people that are kind of like-minded, and they love immigrants and refugees. They people like Plymouth people. And I have been feeling very welcome the times that I have attended service here, until very recently. And that was right after the elections. And I do not like to talk about political matters. Right after the elections, I was at the mall. It was the Glenbrook Mall. I have a young daughter. She's now 4 years old. And, for all, intents and purposes, I could look like somebody that was born here, right? I don't look very different from any of you. In fact, my mother, it's a long story, was born in America. My dad is 100% Italian. So, there was a moment right after the elections where we were in the little playing area for the kids at the mall, and my daughter was playing, and I do this thing where I only speak Italian to my daughter, right? I want her to learn Italian, so that's the only way, because where else is she going to learn it? And where I became very self-conscious at that moment, and I thought, okay, this is so wrong, but I thought, okay, if I start opening my mouth and really talking to my daughter right now, people around me, I'm going to turn. And are they going to think that I don't belong here because I have an accent? I've never felt this way before. Never. And I've been here a long time. Always felt welcome, appreciated, and honored and privileged to be part of this community. So that's just a little framework. Which is one of the reasons why it's very hard for me to be here. But here it is. I said yes already to Michael. So first of all, thank you for being here. This is a great turnout. It's great to see everybody that I do know, and I do know in my heart that even though I haven't met you, it's as if I already have met you. You're one of those individuals that I have been wanting to surround myself with for the past 13 years. You make it possible for people like me and those who are less privileged than me to feel welcome, to feel at home, and to feel like it's possible to create a new life and feel like this is great, we made the right choice to be here. And thank you, Plymouth, for existing, for your philosophy and your values is so well aligned with everything that we're about. Again, I've always felt at home at Plymouth. Thank you for, Michael Spath and the Center for Middle East Peace for putting together programming that is very courageous, very brave, and outspoken. I wish I was this brave. I want to talk about 3 things. First of all, how many of you have actually heard about Amani Family Services before hearing about this event today? Just so I get a sense. Yeah, so that's what I thought. So I just thought it would be helpful to say a few words about who we are just so, yes, so you know who's talking to you. And then I wanted to talk about two things besides what Amani is. One is explaining the difficulty of being in this position, not just on a personal level, but as a director of a organization whose mission is about immigrant refugee services right now as a certified public entity, charitable organizations recognized by the government. It's a very difficult thing to do. And then thirdly, to try to navigate with you, with your help, I will offer some comments about the year, well now 2 years of extreme controversies that we've been living in and that have impacted our services, our clients, and the great majority of our staff. So some comments about how we feel about how things are going. So I hope this is helpful. I did have a volunteer about the slides, and there we go. So Amani Family Services is a nonprofit organization, and the word Amani means peace in the language that's called Swahili, and it means aspirations in Arabic. We love that word. When we picked this name for the organization in September of 2016, we thought this was a great name change. We used to be known as Crime Victim Care of Allen County, which is a kind of a mouthful. It also wasn't really clear about what we were about. Amani Family Services is a nonprofit that's completely dedicated to serving immigrant and refugee families. That's what we do. So we can go on. Well, I have a video that I sometimes show, but I'm just going to pass it. Thank you. So our mission and vision. Our mission is to partner with immigrant and refugee families and the community to promote safety, encourage personal growth, and foster a spirit of belonging. And our vision is immigrant and refugee families and the community working together to build a secure, vibrant, and cohesive society. So now you can kind of understand why it's kind of been difficult lately to exist and say these words and not be sort of called to action outside of our comfort zone sometimes. We work with immigrants and refugees. Our attention every day, Dr. Joliffe is here, if you see us, that's what we do. We spend day by day working with actual immigrants and refugees in 3 program areas. We work in child abuse and neglect prevention and intervention. That means that we have, we encounter cases of families. We work with individuals, children who sometimes are witnessing violence in the home, sometimes are neglected because of drug or substance abuse in the home. They don't receive the care that they need to receive, much like it may happen in any other household, right? And the state of Indiana and Amani Family Services partner to provide services of counseling, casework, and when family situations become really dangerous, so children are removed from the house, Amani Family Services caseworkers supervise the visitation so that parents and children can be together in the same place in a safe way, and we can help them reunite over time. That's always the goal. That's what we do. We also do offer prevention services, so before situations can become abuse or neglect, and families maybe just struggle to make ends meet. They maybe have challenges. And again, what I like to say is that immigrant and refugee families are no different than any of our families. And I stand here with telling you my family has lots of issues, and I don't like to talk about us and them. I'm fully aware or convinced of the fact that each one of us sitting here has experienced some type of family conflict, concern, malady, violence. In fact, statistically, that's the case. 5 out of 6 in the room would have experienced some type of traumatic experience, at least in our childhood. Well, that means immigrants and refugee families are not so special. They too go through the same economic challenges. Again, substance abuse, drug abuse, alcohol, distress, mental distress, anxiety, and so forth. It's also true that immigrants and refugee families can be quite special. They may not speak English, and they may try to reach out to providers that are not ready to serve them in the community. Even government services that are not available to them because of the language barrier. They may not be aware of the fact that their disciplinary actions at home are considered abuse or neglect. They may not be aware as victims of crime of what their rights are. So they're particularly vulnerable. And when you are vulnerable, don't speak the language, you don't have transportation, you don't even know what your rights are, but you are particularly vulnerable, and you become easily a victim of the system, on top of being a victim of crime. So we decided a couple of years ago to start our own community-based counseling program, which is partly funded by Plymouth, and I'm very thankful for that. That's what we call community support. We provide substance abuse groups. We're the only provider of groups in Burmese, and we're quickly becoming the only provider of groups in Spanish. We have groups in Karen, which is a minority language within Burma, and that means we work with probation and offer services that take into account the reasons why individuals may become addicted to substance. We listen to their stories, and they work with each other in a peer support way. So sometimes our clients also need individual support, so we offer counseling services that are not mandatory. So again, immigrants and refugees, individuals that maybe haven't yet processed the experience of witnessing their family members being killed in the country of origin, or maybe the fact that they have been taken advantage in this country. Oftentimes, we work with victims of crime, which is the third area of work. And yes, we tackle things such as connecting victims of crime to the system, to the court system, filling out forms, or transporting them. Well, issues are, there are issues that continue. There are reasons why sometimes it's so very difficult to learn a new language. There is something like post-traumatic stress disorder that takes place, and it's not easily recognized. So our third area of support I already talked about, that's what we call victim care and human trafficking. We have a contract with Indiana Youth Services Association, so human trafficking victims, most is sex trafficking, labor trafficking victims, and victims of any crime can be helped. Again, we're connected to services at no cost. Our employees, they're on the event, on the event page for tonight. It's kind of like the United Nations, right? So because of what we do, we tend to attract immigrants and refugees to our workforce. We don't necessarily go and look for individuals from other countries, but the beauty is we're all very well traveled and very passionate about what we do. As a result, we're very diverse. We come from more than a dozen different countries and speak more than a dozen different languages. And it's, quite frankly, the only place where I could see myself working. Again, because that's my bubble, that's my safe place. And I quite like traveling in Fort Wayne without leaving Fort Wayne sometimes. Just to give you a perspective, we serve around 1,000 individuals a year from a number of different countries. About half of our clients are from Burma, about a quarter of them are from Mexico, and then I'd say we really do see a long list of countries that tend to vary. And we're ready to serve them in those languages, but we also can serve outside of those languages that are listed there, just because we have agreements with language companies as well outside of our workforce that speaks Arabic, Bosnian, and so forth. So that's very brief, hopefully, to just talk about Amani. And I want you to know that, in conclusion to just this first piece, if you do know of a family, if you encounter a family, maybe a neighbor, that might need extra support, and you don't remember exactly what Amani does, contact us. We're happy to connect it to services. That's what we do. Whether we provide those directly, we just connect them as a bridge to the community at large. So please keep that in mind. I brought some materials there just for that purpose, so you can hopefully pick up a brochure, find our phone number, or just walk in the office. We're on Lake Avenue, not very far. So that concludes the first part. That was the easy part. Last year, when the first travel ban came out in the news, was also the same day that my husband had his most intrusive cancer surgery. It was exactly the same day. So when I say it was a difficult year, it was an extremely difficult year for my family on a professional level, personal level, and it was a year that sort of shocked us, right? It kind of uprooted us. And I believe in activism by action. I'm not one that likes to, yell at people. And yet, I'm finding myself in this place where I don't know how long more I can stay quiet. As a 501c3, that's the code that IRS uses to classify us as a 501c3 organization. We are not to take political action. And while it is true that we can do issue advocacy, we can educate and advocate around issues. You find organizations doing that all the time. Maybe it's the environment, maybe it's gun violence, or protection laws, or healthcare or education. It is also true that sometimes when these issues become divisive in elections, and we can probably agree that immigration is an issue that is divisive in elections right now, for pretty much any level of elections, then the line between issue advocacy and political intervention can be very difficult to draw. So I'm standing here to tell you, sometimes I'm not very comfortable in the shoes that I'm forced to wear, because as director of a 501c3 organizations, I have a responsibility to not cross that line. And it is my mission, or at least it is my personal intent, to protect my own staff members and the clients that we serve, and not bring negative attention to what we do, and quite frankly, not even taking advantage of what is going on in the news for our own sake, maybe funding or donations. That also wouldn't go well with my values. Yeah, it has been a year of controversy, and this is the first time I find myself speaking about it, and I'll just leave with that. I have probably 5 more minutes. Where do I have that?
Whatever you need.
Oh, no. So just a few things, just a few points that I wrote down, so that, as my good friend and colleague says, I can discipline my heart, to speak with diligence and not let my heart guide completely all my words, because it's really hard to talk about this. First of all, obviously, immigration was a centerpiece of the campaign, the presidential campaign. And we have lived in the past year in an unreal environment where there has been a series of executive actions and aggressive rhetoric that have had a palpable impact on our mission. From a promised wall along the border of Mexico, from intensified crackdown on undocumented immigrants to the reversal of priorities for arresting undocumented immigrants, making it virtually possible for every one of the estimated 11 million individuals living in this country without documents, making it virtually possible for each one of them to be deported at any time, even family members, children, who don't commit a serious crime. Executive orders taking a hard line on immigration, although the travel ban is being locked indefinitely. And more recently, as I was thinking about presenting here tonight, just about the same evening, I think the event came out, where I had to, and all of us had to listen to racist, offensive remarks from the president, particularly directed at certain countries. Finally, immigration is one of the issues that speaks right to the base of the people that brought Trump to Washington. Once again, I want to say that Amani, you may not have heard a lot about us because our choice has been to concentrate on the well-being of our own staff members rather than taking advantage of the current environment. But it has been increasingly difficult. Those words that I heard just a few days ago from the president, those racist remarks, I felt like swords hitting right through my body and heart. And as I was listening to those words and the trend, and I was reminded of the trend of actions taken by the current administration, I went literally, physically, it looked like this, right? And the kitchen counter was kind of like this, and this. And I went down, and then I started sobbing. I am at a loss for words. The reason why sometimes you don't hear me speaking so much, I'm at a loss for words. Is this really happening? This is so sad. For all of us who are foreign born, no matter where you're from, we feel a sense of attachment. It's almost as if you offend one immigrant, you're offending all immigrants. Or at least that's how I feel, and the people who work with me all feel. I can tell you that. We carry with us also the burden of history, depending on the country we're from. In my case, I'm acutely aware of fascism and dictatorship. And I'm from a nation, Italy, that, yes, now it's appreciated. Everybody gives me the high five. Oh, you're from Venice, Italy, wonderful. Well, not too long ago, we were not one of the good guys, and being from Italy wasn't really the best thing. Again, my mother is American. My dad is Sicilian, not even just Italian. And my grandparents never accepted that marriage. I remember that. Living in between two worlds is difficult enough. That's another reason why we don't necessarily actively participate in a lot of the demonstrations, because it's just so deeply difficult already. And this will be true in a very welcoming environment. It's a grieving and challenging experience to live every day of your life waking up, sometimes checking whether you made the right choice. And just like grief, just like losing a family member, sometimes it hits you and you don't even know where it comes from, right? Why am I crying today? And I wasn't crying yesterday because I was missing, today I'm missing my parents. And yesterday, yeah, I was missing them, but I wasn't thinking of them that much. It's a grief experience in itself. And we look up to our leaders here to kind of inspire us. Leadership impacts integration. And now there is a new or more acute fear. Sometimes that's the rational fear of those parents who are making plans to prepare for potential deportation and the transfer of their parental rights to other individuals in case they lose their children. It is the fear of those from Haiti who are about to lose their temporary protected status. It is the fear of those who don't know whether they will be able to visit family members because of travel bans. the fear of those who have been recipients of DACA, who have come out of the shadows, share their numbers, names with the government, and now whose status is in a limbo. And sometimes it's a less rational fear, the one that I described. Or maybe it is a little rational too, because I've been told several times to go back to the country where I'm from. The positive in all this is that I am reminded every day, constantly, of the reason why our work matters. And I wake up every morning with a clear sense of why today matters. That's a joy, and I should thank the administration for that. I was recently asked by a reporter, by phone, I don't know how I got my cell phone, whether I agree that Fort Wayne is no longer the city of churches, but is now the city of faiths. And I was really taken aback. Why do we have to choose one or the other? Why do we have to be divisive? I have no reason. Fort Wayne is both the city of churches and is the city of faiths. One of the many negatives that we're experiencing is that we are spending so much time talking about this, which is important, but we're not speaking about economic development. We're not speaking about immigration reform, of the need to approve degrees from other countries, or degree credentialing, the protective status for victims of human trafficking and violence. One of the things I fear the most is that we may become even numb to the news because this may not be so shocking anymore. My conclusion, and this is truly my conclusion, is that I need your help. I need your help. It doesn't mean I need your money, trust me. That's what I'm saying, I need your help. We've been focusing on serving families, that's what we do. And yet, we feel the strong need to take a stand, to provide education to the community, to support the vision that we have, which is connecting immigrants and refugees to the community at large. So if any of you individually, if you represent a group, and Michael, want to collaborate with Amani, we want to spend the next year ahead of us bringing together individuals around education. That's what we can do. Nobody can take that from us. So please reach out to me. You have my information there and in the brochures. And just bring up your ideas. We're open for suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Reverend Bill McGill, Fort Wayne for 20 years now. Bill is the founding senior pastor of Imani Baptist Temple in Fort Wayne. He served on the Youth Council for the Ohio State Conference NAACP, was the executive pastor of the One Church, One Offender program. He's the one who brought Bishop Desmond Tutu to our community a number of years ago to highlight the One Church, One Offender program. He's been working on putting together a group called CORD, Conquering Our Racial Divisions. Former president of the Fort Wayne NAACP. And he's on the Indiana State Advisory Commission to the United States Civil Rights Commission. He's known widely in our community for leading the Fort Wayne Love Train, walks, shining a light on cooperation between police and the community, youth empowerment, racial healing, and other social issues. Let's say a word of welcome to Reverend Bill McGill.
Well, I can assure you, unlike Irene, Imani Temple or CORD needs your money. I don't have it like she does. Needs your help, your money, and your support and your prayers. I'm privileged to be here. I'm not going to be Baptist tonight. I'm going to be Episcopalian, so I'm almost through. I'm more than half done. Mike said, well, I plan on you taking 30 minutes. I said, Mike, my sermons on Sunday take 30 minutes. It's been a long week for us, but we're grateful to be here. Dr. King, in a sermon on November 4th, 1956, just 5 days before my birth, laid out a framework in which the Apostle Paul would send an epistle to American Christians. He said, America, as I look at you from afar, I wonder whether your normal and spiritual progress has been commensurate with your scientific progress. Seems to me that your moral progress lags behind your scientific progress. Your poet Thora used to talk about improved means to an unimproved end. And how often this is true, Dr. King said. He said, you have allowed the material means by which you live to outdistance the spiritual ends for which you live. You have allowed your mentality to outrun your morality. You have allowed your civility to outdistance your culture. Though your scientific genius you have made of the world a neighborhood, but through your moral and spiritual genius, you have failed to make of it a brotherhood. That's really where we are as a nation. We have the train of equality locked in place at the station. Authentic religion, though, and Webster defines it as merely the search for God. And maybe perhaps that's the problem, that we have a nation of individuals that are still searching for God instead of locating God and moving from religion to relationship. That's where you would say amen if I were at home today. So authentic religion has clearly lost its dominion and has been co-opted by a dark and dangerous division. And as for race, it's always held a tenuous place in the American space, where the majority has always been a tad uncomfortable with a colored face. So the issue tonight is not the impact from my perspective of a leader named Trump, but rather how such an individual could make the electoral jump. In a nation that prides itself in being morally led, how was it able to digest ingredients that were being divisively fed? But therein lies America's dilemma. The salesman has always been superior to the product. In other words, our potentiality has always been greater than our actuality, or in the words of that late great theologian James Brown, America has always been just talking loud and saying nothing. It started out, did it not, with our nation's framers, who were nothing more than racial gamers, who made a unified declaration but then quickly digressed into racial separation. Tonight our nation remains filled with racial frustration because it is based on a flawed foundation. And the so-called church is no better because it consistently ignores the history of its own theological letter. We made a Christ with European skin and taught for years that blacks were penalized with slavery because of sin, all in an effort to make certain a particular segment of our society was positioned to win. No, our nation was in a slump long before it elected Donald Trump. America's been trying to get over its racial hump long before the keys to the White House were turned over to Donald Trump. America has consistently rejected efforts to remove its discriminatory stump, so it's disingenuous to lay the blame for our current climate at the feet of Donald Trump. No, even if we were somehow able to dump Trump, and I'm not a part of that, no Pence, no. I support the devil I know. Even if we were somehow able to dump Trump, there is no viable evidence to suggest that equality would somehow instantly become possible. I'm convinced, at least from the Christian perspective, and I'm in the United Church of Christ, so let me raise the words of Jeremiah Wright and say that I am unashamedly black and unapologetically Christian. I'm convinced, at least from the Christian perspective, that the words of Christ hold the only solution to our social and racial pollution. The axe is laid to the root of the trees. Therefore everything which bringeth not forth good fruit is cut down and thrown in the fire. I'm convinced. Mike made a reference to the NFL dilemma, and there's a similar moment in the movie Concussion. If you haven't seen it yet, you need to see it. Because there's a part where the NFL lawyer says to the doctor, do you not know who we are? We are the NFL. We have our own day. It used to be the churches, and we took it from them. In other words, the church is no longer the church that we know. The church, Mike referred to, used to be prophetic. But in the words of Leonard Ravenhill, it has become pathetic. It used to be electrifying, and now it's electronic. But it serves a very useless purpose in the dynamics that's needful in our world. I'm convinced today that the church has created an environment where sinners are enclosed, when it was designed to be the place where sinners were exposed. And I know it's not a popular, useful word in our progressive theological way of thinking, and much less preaching, but I have to reach back 45 years and ask with Dr. Carl Memminger, whatever became of sin? And I know I just lost half of you, but don't assume the targets I have in you. See, just because you're politically or financially winning is no indication that you're not sinning. In fact, Jesus once asked, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose its own soul? Sin, hamashi in the Greek, literally means just missing the mark. Or in the McGill translation, it is unwilling to engage in the needed perspiration to meet or exceed the divine expectation. Preach, black man. And I hear somebody thinking, McGill, let's be real. That Bible is not really clear on how to seal the deal, but that's only because its pages you don't frequently peel. Micah 6:8 clearly says in the King James Version, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. What does God expect you to do? I don't know what God wants me to do. I don't know how God wants me to act. I don't know how God feels about the cutting issues of this day. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Amen. So that says to me, if you're offering people a frown instead of a grin, that's sin. If you're degrading people based on the color of their skin, that's sin. If because of their sexual orientation you're rejecting people as kin, that's sin. If your charitable donations to progressive causes and politicians are thin, that's sin. I'm glad you're paying attention. So see, we have to stop using our personal sin definition as ammunition towards those who don't share our composition. I'm just foolish enough to believe what I read in the Bible. They tell me there was a woman who came to the well one day. She was a woman of questionable moral activity. Questionable enough that she came in the time of day when no other women would be there. And she was of such questionable nature that Jesus decided to have a conversation with her, and she was so unused to anyone talking to her that even she felt uncomfortable. But I tell you, out of just one conversation, I'm about done now, one conversation, no small group, no cell group, no workshops. One conversation changed that lady's name, changed her whole way about seeing life. And she ran telling others, come see a man that told me everything that I ever did and told me how to make sure I never did it again. And that's what an authentic encounter with God will be, however you define God to be. I'm just convinced Mother Teresa, bless her memory, used to say, I love all of the great world religions. I just prefer my own. I know what works for me.
But whatever your higher power is, whatever God has called you to be and called you to a place of comfort with, if you are actively and consistently and persistently following that God, you're a person who will act justly, who will love mercy, and will seek to do good to all that you encounter. The older I get, the more mature I become. I find myself pondering as a Christian only the words of Christ in the Bible. Just those red words. Everything else is up for debate. But I love what Jesus said. And all I know is that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have an everlasting life. Mutual friend of Dr. Gardner and I, H. Beecher Hicks, says the most dangerous part of the service in a Christian church is the invitation to discipleship, because it dares to say whosoever can come. All I know is that Jesus said, I have come that they might have life, all of them, and that more abundantly. All I know is that Jesus said, come unto me all ye that labor. Somebody holler all. And you know what all means in the Hebrew and the Greek? It means all. Come unto me all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. One of the last lines in the book of Revelation says, let anyone who is thirsty come. Let anyone who desires drink freely from the water of life. It's time for relational religion to again have dominion. I tell you, though, that relational religion that talked about in the books of Acts, that had everybody sell the things that they had, lay them all at the apostles' feet, and they had all things common, and they just went from house to house on a daily basis. Can you imagine not having to have potluck for about once every 300 years? They didn't just have a Sunday potluck. That's not what the text says. They went from house to house daily, fellowshipping and communing with one another. God save us from our annual Martin Luther King days. Save us from honoring the man and his memory and his legacy just on the day in which he was born, in the day in which his life was cut down. Save us from selective effectiveness. If the dream is going to be realized, it's got to be something that's not talked out. It's got to be walked out. It's time for us to have relational religion that has dominion and allow grace to cancel out our rage around race. It's not a matter of might as it relates to the far right. They don't bother me. It's the absence of our redemptive light. Light cancels out darkness. If this room were totally dark, you would only have to flick one bit to be able to see your way through here. Light cancels out darkness. Time for us to let our light shine and glow. That's the only way our nation will redemptively flow. If we let our light redemptively glow, we will hit discrimination and bigotry with a deadly blow. When we let our light redemptively glow, we will again gain empowering ability to then do what we know. Let the church say, amen. Amen. Hallelujah.
Oh my, oh my. We're so grateful for both of these presentations. We have some time for questions for our two panelists. So please, would like to start.
I have a question. Does anybody see a faith spring, like an Arab Spring coming?
Faith. The question is, does anybody see a faith spring like an Arab Spring coming?
It's been a difficult week. I participated on Saturday in the homegoing celebration for my mother. 81 years of age, just 20 years between us exactly almost. She was born July 9th, I was born November 9th. She's 61, I'm 81. Oh, she was 81, I'm 61. And all my life, seeing her working for change, working for this faith spring, to return to authentic Christianity or Judaism or Islam, again, authentic. The Islam that Malcolm saw when he went to Mecca. And he came back, and I'm convinced that's why they had to kill him, because they were perpetrating an Islam that was not authentic. And if he had changed, that would have changed the whole dynamics. So I've been waiting, for over 4 decades. I'm beginning to lose hope, to be honest. If we are to use what has happened as a roadmap or a blueprint for what does happen, well, my goodness, I don't see on the near horizon something changing. I'm convinced that progressives will win the White House the next time, only because of fear over what these 4 years. But what will it matter if, again, we're again in power in name only and not doing anything on a progressive daily activity basis to make substantive change? I just believe faith has been co-opted, because faith is no longer what you do. It's just what you say. You don't have to do anything. Long as you just say it. I mean, individuals in my community, rappers, can wear what I call Dracula killing crosses around their neck while they're grabbing their crotch and using vulgar words and, saying, so the cross doesn't mean what it used to mean. It's become just a jewelry statement. That's all. There is no identification or representation that you have an eternal reservation. So I'm to the place in my faith where I'm saying, like the prophet, even so come quickly, Lord Jesus. Because the world as we know it, I think we've gone down that slippery slope almost to a point of no return. That's just my honest answer.
Strikes me, that we might find a faith spring in places we might not even be looking for it. We may not find it in the church. Now, this church, I'm kind of prejudiced, but this church might be an anomaly. But maybe the people fleeing from the churches have maybe the young people, or the people who call themselves the nuns, the 23% now of the population. We might be able to find it in artists and poets, like I said, and musicians and playwrights, people in the arts, people who are dealing with deep things. We might find it in psychologists who are dealing with human consciousness at various levels. I'm just wondering whether or not the church has abdicated its right. At least most churches have abdicated its right to talk about faith. Most churches, not all. Pam, you were going to say something.
My concern is for Irene, for children in the schools. My concern is that the bullying that they're hearing on the news coming from someone they should be respecting is starting to infect the way that they treat each other. And I wonder if in your interactions with children from other countries, if they're experiencing more of that now than they did before, or if that's not something I need to be concerned with.
So, yeah, and I don't know that I understand completely the question, so I'm going to repeat it. You let me know if that makes sense.
I can repeat.
You want to?
Yeah, the question is, what's the impact of bullying in the schools on children? And can Irene say a few words about that and the children that her organization's dealt with?
Okay, because I was understanding the question in a different way, so I'm glad you clarified. Well, I'll tell you the truth. The experience for us and for the families hasn't dramatically changed. Their life has been difficult for quite a long time. there is a reason why Obama was called the deporter-in-chief. And so we've over the past 13 years that I've been here working with immigrants and refugees, those without documents, those who are vulnerable, have been vulnerable for a very long time, almost got used to that. We have seen, and sometimes, again, it was that fear that I was talking about. So we have heard of episodes where individuals have been literally stopped on the street and have been the object of racist remarks in a way that I had never heard of before, we never heard of before. And we do think that that's happening more, but it's not new. We do work with victims of bullying quite a bit, and we have actually a summer program for refugees that kind of helps them navigate this life that they have to experience between two worlds, where they go home and speak one language and they go to school and they speak another language, and then they're told by the parents to wear the hijab, and then they go to school and they kind of don't know what the right things to do. So they're experiencing more dramatic, probably, challenges within themselves than necessarily what is going on the outside.
For Irene, are you, as a government agency, allowed to work with undocumented immigrants?
We're not a government agency.
Oh, I thought you said you were under the government umbrella.
As a nonprofit organization, we're a private nonprofit organization recognized by the government. 70% or so of our government, of our funding comes from the government, and the funds that we have do not specify to not work with undocumented. As a matter of fact, undocumented families and individuals, that's a very common misconception. They have rights. So services need to be provided to them whether or not they have papers, and that includes government services. So for instance, hospital, in case of emergency, you don't deny services to families. So that's the fact that somebody is without documents doesn't mean that they don't have rights.
Yeah, this is just a follow-up on the bullying question, and my experience has been with refugees. They inspire me because they are survivors. They are people who have come out of war or come out of circumstances that many of us are unimaginable. And their children are survivors also. The bullying isn't limited to, what I'll call the nativist Americans. It's within all the different communities too. I remember Afghan refugees at Northside High School forming a gang because the Mexicans and the black gangs, neither would recognize them, and they needed power. So, the youth problem. Can you speak to how the youth in the refugee communities are adapting and reacting, and what services there are?
One of the unfortunate realities is that we're seeing a huge growth in requests for services for adolescents that are involved in petty crimes, drug use, from the Allen County Juvenile Center. So that's dramatically increasing. That means, again, these are adolescents that sometimes they just don't have enough activities. They don't have enough healthy activities to be engaged in because, again, they're not as connected, especially in the summertime. If school is not on, so violence happens, petty crimes happens, and mostly we find, again, that one of the biggest issues is actually within the home. Is the relationship with their parents and their difficulty navigating who they are. It's one of the most intimate things you can talk about is who are you, right? One of the most difficult questions we can answer, and they have to answer is this our home? And that just creates all sorts of issues. And the relationship that they have with their parents is sometimes reversed in a way. There's a power reversal because the children speak the language, the parents don't, so they go to the bank and guess who's going to be the interpreter, which is not appropriate. The children. We go to the doctor, and again, the children are hearing things they shouldn't be hearing, but they have all this power they didn't ask for.
The language. Yeah.
The language. It's very dramatic.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Terry, oh, sorry, Ron. Terry, first, thank you very much to each of you. I'm honored and proud to think of all three of you as friends. I'm thinking Dr. Spath's comment that resistance is a moral duty in this day. And I guess I'm trying to look beyond, and I'm trying in my own life to look beyond the words. What does it mean to resist in this day? What does it mean to act justly? What does it mean to love mercy? How do we do that?
Again, in Black and African American Baptist thinking, we believe in a real devil. A real God, a real devil. Text says, resist the devil, he'll flee. Again, if there is no demand, there's no supply. And so again, the only reason hate persists is because individuals, again, will not give up their selective way of thinking, their personal descriptive way of thinking. And so it goes back, Terry, to John chapter 14, and it speaks about, from the Christian perspective, Jesus' own frustration with the church. We all know, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. So I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there you may be also. And where I'm going, and the way you know. And somebody spoke up and said, hold up. We don't have a clue what you're talking about. Jesus says something very interesting. Have I not been with you so long? Now you got to remember now, so long was just 3 years. That's all he had been interacting with them. And he described it as a long time. Go back to the woman at the well. Didn't take her long for whatever reason. So again, if we stop following religion as we know it and pursue a personal relationship with our God, that changes the standards. Again, when I weigh myself at the Y, I'm not ever surprised. I eat right, 16 miles minimally every week. So I'm not surprised. So again, it's all behavior related. So if individuals would pursue a personal, persistent, Psalm 42, as the deer pants after the water brooks, so my soul pants after thee. If we get that kind of thirst for personal relationship with God as we know it versus professional relationship, then the rest will take care of itself. Last one. Last scriptural reference. Jesus said, upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. He didn't say anything about gates within it. He didn't address that. Concerned about. He said, you don't have to worry about explosion. But implosion, that's something else.
From my perspective, again, Terry, hi, thank you for the question. It's so hard, right? It's so hard. I tried navigating that a bit when I was working at the city of Fort Wayne and working for a government agency. It's also even more difficult than it is to work with a non-profit agency, where you have opinions and you have to, when you're on government time, with all your own values and still do what you're supposed to do. For us at Amani, to resist, we sort of have a test of values. We have core values, we have pillars that we agreed on, and we're not going to cross those. So no matter how difficult the environment may become, we will continue to do what we do. That means, the main three questions are, is what we do helping the community? Is it client-centered? So is it the best we can do for our families? And is it strength-based? Are we basing it on what our families do best? Or is it sort of pointing out the defects of our families or the weaknesses of ourselves and our families? If everything that we do is helping the community, is client-centered, and is based on strengths, then we know we're on the right track. And that's our way to resist, is just to stay on track for us.
Rhonda.
I was just going to ask Irene, do you seek volunteers to work with some of your people, and maybe in language things? And I know that in the past that's been the case. And have you found those volunteers to then be motivated to speak in a positive way for what you're working towards?
Yeah, volunteers are very engaged for us, and it's from that point of view that you're, as just one of the positive consequences of the current environment is that people are wanting to help us. And we do work with volunteers for special events. We do use volunteers that have bilingual, talents. We have even volunteers sometimes as therapists, depending on their credentials. Sometimes people get disappointed because we don't offer a lot of opportunities for individuals who are not credentialed to work directly with clients because of the nature of what we do. Victims of crime, substance abuse, child abuse. We do require quite a bit of background checks, and volunteers is just like employees for us.
Reverend McGill, real quickly at the beginning you mentioned your group you're putting together, CORD. What is that about?
Again,
Repeat your question, Bill.
Yeah, she wanted to know what CORD is. It is, again, conquering our racial divisions, and it grew out of the personal relationship that John Gardner and I have. And of course, a couple of years ago, we had an evening of gospel delight in black and white when he and I played off each other in a sermon. Was anybody here that was there? Yeah, that was just great fun. Just showing, again, the different styles in preaching and mannerism, but how we were able to collectively connect those still in worship. And so if we use that as, again, a beginning premise, then we thought the rest would take care of itself. What we're trying to do in the not too distant future that you'll hear about is just create opportunities for individuals to gather in the Charleston Memorial Hall, which we transferred our narthex in at Imani Temple, but just gathering people together around meals and just eating and talking. And yes, please do bring politics to the table to go along with our discussion. But in that kind of environment, when people are just eating together, talking together, loving and laughing together, we'll learn that we have far more similarities than differences. Because it's just something about being at the table. And I was down in Savannah, and they have a place that does this. They're only open through the week, and you can't make reservations. You just have to stand in line, and you're going to sit at the table with people you may or may not have ever known. And it was a great experience. I said, we can localize that, and that's going to be the next thing that we do, and still have our love training. And we're moving it from the spring to the fall, thinking that the weather will cooperate there. But that's what it grew out of, just a personal relationship that we're trying to make a corporate relationship.
Thank you.
Jane?
I look around this room, and there are lovely people in here, but our ages are pretty high.
What?
So how do you attract young people? How can we support young people to get out there and resist?
I know that we have to take, since we are at those stages where at least we have children, and in some instances grandchildren, we have to find ways to pour into their lives these principles that we have. And I can tell you, as a young man that has a freshman daughter down in Savannah, outside of Savannah, Georgia, I remember sending her a picture. I was at the memorial to the girls killed, the 4 girls killed in Birmingham, sent her a copy of the memorial, told her that's where I was standing, and she texted me back, moment of silence. And I was like, oh, okay, she's kidding, you know, but she gets it because it's been modeled before her and poured into her, and that's part of the challenge. Again, of passing this baton of compassion and care and service to the next generation. That's where it starts.
So I just came back from Italy, and one of the things that I always, I'm reminded of when I go home, I guess it's still home, is the different types of conversations that I tend to have around the table. And please know, this is a safe place, so I tend to say this. I hope you're not offended by what I'm going to say next. Is that we tend to be more engaged in this type of conversations. I am constantly challenged in Italy, whether it's at my parents' home or a friend's home. We speak about books that we read. We watch the news, read the news together. It's a very intellectual, right? we tend to be a little bit more challenged. And I think that comes from having lived in that environment as children. We kind of carry that. If you enter my parents' home right now, I'll give you, my parents are a little particular because they're both writers, they're all both anthropologists, so it's a different story. But you enter, there's thousands of books. How many books are in our homes? I don't know, but I'm still old-fashioned. I do love books. And so that to me is a symptom. If we don't have them, if our families' residences look a lot like magazines from Better Home and Garden, whatever that's called, or they're so cute and color coordinated, but there's no books. Guess who's not going to read? And guess who's not going to have a conversation or be able to come up with quotes? Like the people around me are doing. So that's important. I've been inspired for a very long time by my parents and by the people that I'm lucky to be surrounded by. That's on us, I think. But then in general, I think there's a tendency for my generation to be, and younger, because I'm young, but I could be younger, to be so busy, right? We're so busy. I have young children at home. For me to be able to be here tonight, I have to make quite an arrangement, and I'm happy to do that. But it is more difficult. I don't own my schedule. My daughter owns my schedule. So.
Tom? Thank you. And then share.
Yeah, I want to say that I feel like I'm in Germany in the 1930s. Think about the growth of the far-right political wing during the 30s. The churches fought it, but they were gradually subdued. They fought back as hard as they could. Nations then became part of that bizarre, sad process. The free speech was squelched. The media was squelched. All kinds of efforts were eventually successful in subduing democratic government. I mean, that was what happened, 80 years ago? I feel like I'm there right now. On the other hand, I've been involved in another big downtown church here. We're in a pastor search committee, a pastor search process, and I've heard the term progressive theology a lot. And I didn't realize that was so much progressive theology until I went and looked up a definition. There's environmental justice, human rights, the whole thing. I think the beautiful thing and a great way to link together everything that you discussed today, the Christian or Jewish or Muslim movement, and from the viewpoint of progressive theology, and going beyond, praying and praying and praying more in our church or in our home and getting out in the streets and really working hard to make sure that what happened 80 years ago doesn't happen here.
Amen. Sure.
I guess for me, and I get the age thing a lot, I've worked with children for, over 40 years, and what I see every day is those little things that I instill in them is coming back. And it's coming back. And that's my hope. And that's how I choose to do my work. But I see it every day. At the peace table, when kids can work out, 3 and 5-year-olds on all abilities can work out things. I think that's where we have to put that's what I feel I have to put my mind to. Because they're going to take it home, and they do. They take it to their families. The families come to me and are like, what is this? And I'm like, oh, conflict resolution. It's how you treat people. And I believe that as a grandparent, which I am, teacher, whatever way you work with any age of child, children, young adults, it's our responsibility to share that with them. Because they're not getting a lot of it.
One last question or comment. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got an issue that came up today. We're about ready to shut down the government over the issue of the immigration. And I see this as like you're talking about the whiteism. That's what this is. For some reason, our two political parties are so concerned about not giving 11 million people the right to vote, their citizenship, and to pay taxes into our government, where they're using all our services, but that's what the issue's about. I've lived in an all-white community. I've worked in an almost all-black community. Mark and I've lived in Mexico. We have seen a lot of stuff. I've gone from a plant that was all male to a plant that was all female. Okay? Those are huge differentials that the lady started swearing at me in Polish. And I told Anna there's no reason to bring God into this discussion. That's correct. But that's what I see that right now we have a president who talked about all these immigrants and the crime from them. Yet that's not where the majority of our crime is coming from. We got a war happening in the south side of Chicago. We have deaths in southern, southeastern Fort Wayne. That's unaccounted for, and they're not even resolved. And yet we're worried about the one guy who murdered or raped somebody out in California. There's one case out of hundreds and hundreds. We've had murders in this city over gun violence. And nobody's talking about it because the white people like their guns. Okay? The other thing is, I come from a family of educators. I'm a sheriff. It starts in the family. My mother was a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse in a very poor community in Allegheny County. She used to have what they called Potato Day on Thursday. The kids were from poor families. She brought potatoes in. She came from a farm, and they made potato soup. On Friday, she let the kids out early because Dad's coming home with the food money and the groceries. I don't believe that anybody in our education system understands, or I should say in the political system, understands what the teachers go through. I've been with Mark for 20 years, and the teachers are not respected. We force children to take tests that I don't think a single person in the state house could pass. Now, you're spending millions of dollars every year to test these kids, and they're learning from the test. And yet the people that are voting this in, I want them to take the darn test. Have them sit through the 3 days of testing that takes 2 hours each day, whatever. I mean, I've had, college exams that did take 6 hours of testing in a week. I remember I took an exam where I had 3 classes in 1 day and I had 2-hour exams. I mean, that was a lot of testing in 1 day. And we expect that from kids that are 8 and 10 and 12 years old? That's ridiculous.
Thank you very much.
But that's the thing. We have to fix the education system, and we have to change it at the state level and the local level as well.
Thank you. Bill, Irene, do you want to make any closing comments? Let's say thank you to our 2 guests. Take a look at our programs for the coming winter and spring. Thank you for being here tonight. Godspeed you on your way home.